Today we were talking about bicycles. Your favorite types of bicycles. Can you say bicycles or is it?
Bicycles.
I like that. Yeah.
There's a practice with acceptance and commitment therapy where you just say the same word over and over again until it loses its meaning. Have you heard of that?
No,
It's like
but it makes sense in my mind though, like because that happens all the time. You just say something over and over again, and then
yeah, it like gives like distance to it, like kind of objectifies
wow,
an idea. So now it's like kind of over there, and you can look at it differently.
I've never heard of objectifying in like a good way before.
I use words very literally.
That is good. Good. All right. Well, everybody, welcome to our episode on dating. We're no longer saying the dating number because we keep getting lost.
I think it's 14.
14. That's, man, we're making history. But yeah, for today's topic, we're going to go deep into that. Make sure you stick around until the end because we're also going to be mentioning people left a lot of comments about what they wanted to learn about during the episode. So we're going to kind of do like a Q&A at the end, if you will. So stick around to help our algorithm for YouTube and all that.
We also have a Patreon now, so please subscribe to the Patreon.
Yeah.
What we're gonna do is every other episode is gonna be fully on YouTube, and then every other episode besides that is gonna be half on YouTube, and the other half will be on Patreon because we just thought it's a good time to maybe try and fund this through this,
Yeah,
as opposed to through us.
I mean, we've literally gotten comments of people saying you guys should do a Patreon.
That's true. So it's their fault.
So it's actually them.
It wasn't my idea.
It
It was their idea.
Thank you guys. Well, to start our episode on dating, I had prepared a little diddle or whatever, and it's going to set up the structure because I think there's so many good things in dating. We can talk about how to like date well. I like in talking about like attachment styles, neurodivergence, and all that stuff, and we'll just see what happens. But to start, I want people to imagine you are giving a speech at a wedding. It's you're the best man or best woman or whatever, and you're giving a speech, and you have one of two options at this point. You can give the speech in a way where you read it word for word. There's no going off script. There's no human element in it, and you're just this robotic person reading it from beginning to end. In that moment, there's two things that's going to happen to your audience. One, they're going to feel this sense of assurance that you know exactly where you're going. And they're going to feel like, okay, well, I don't feel overstimulated or anything like that. But they're also going to start to yawn because they're so bored. On the other end, let's say that you don't have a script when you go up there and you just go off the cuff. You're just reading passionately. I mean, you're not reading anything. You're just going passionately talking about how much you love this person, but you're so lost in your words that there's no assurance as to where you're going. Two things are going to happen to the audience. One, they're not going to be bored, but two, they're going to be extremely overstimulated. And so I think this ties into a really cool concept in dialectical behavioral therapy called wise mind, where you put together both structure and passion and emotion together. And you go up there and you give the speech, and people are assured that you know where you're going, but you're also not this robot that's reading it word for word. And the reason I bring up that story is because it makes me think about dating. Because with dating, people run into one of two errors. They either turn it too robotic and try to make everything structured, and you get a lot of clients that are like, I'm doing everything right, and this person is not sort of feeling the connection. I'm, setting up the dates. I'm making sure this person feels safe. I'm telling them over and over again, I'm yours. I'm never going away. And yet the person rejects them and they say, I'm just not interested. I'm just not feeling the thing. And then you have the other group of people that are like, oh my gosh, like this person is just so magnetic and I feel so much chemistry, but I keep running into danger and they keep on hurting my feelings so much. And then you take it to the next level where you're neurodivergent and you've got ADHD and you find those people that are less structured, even more stimulating, and you're more likely to run into issues there. But that's going off topic. Anyways, all that to say, dating well looks like creating both safety and pleasure together in good harmony. And I think that could save a lot of people from trouble if they realize that, if they could create assurance and safety and pleasure.
That's really well said.
Thanks.
I like how, what made you think of this example?
Well, honestly, just I can't push. I would have to think about that for a second. But lately, I've been really interested in the Wise Mind document, and I noticed that a lot of people lately have been struggling with, like, at least on my client load, with dating and relationships and trying to find like a good flow. And a lot of people saying, I'm just doing everything right, and dissecting that and figuring it out together. And so as I look more into wise mind, it was pretty cool to just put a lot of those pieces together. So it was just sort of like this. I bet there was something that triggered it though that I don't remember.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And as you know, I ran DBT groups for like 4 years, and Wise Mind is the first big lesson in when you start a DBT group. It's teaching the whole Wise Mind thing. So just for those of you who don't know, if you think of Wise Mind as like a Venn diagram, there's 2 circles and then there's a middle intersecting circle. Wise Mind would be in that middle circle. On the left-hand side is the kind of rational mind, the reasonable mind. And then on the right-hand side is the emotion mind. And so like emotion mind is essentially someone who's driven by emotional impulse. And on the other side, rational mind is kind of driven by just kind of logic. So Wise Mind is the in-between, and something that I'll steal from my past supervisor, the way she describes Wise Mind, shout out to Snita, is it's the incorporation of all ways of knowing. So it's not valuing logic above emotion, and it's not valuing emotion above logic. It's finding a way to incorporate both of those things in making a decision. And I feel like dating is a really good example of that, because a lot of times people will say, oh, they check all the boxes. The second someone, this is so funny, but the second someone says, second a client comes in and they say, oh, the person I'm dating checks all the boxes. I'm like, oh, well, I guess they're not right for you then. Because no one ever describes someone they're dating as checking all the boxes and feels positively about them. There's always a but that comes after that statement.
That is hilarious, but that's so true.
Like, oh, so you don't like them. Cool.
Right, yeah, they check all the boxes, but like that's always the line. Or they might even just say they check all the boxes and they're just convincing themselves that they like them.
Yeah, but that's the wrong boxes. I think the problem is their idea, and this is really part of what keeps people stuck, is the idea of what they should be looking for versus what they actually want are not the same thing. And because they're looking at someone through the lens of their abstract idea of a perfect mate, they're checking all the boxes, but somehow it's not scratching any itches,
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I'll use this as a good analogy for that too. But I think about like people who lean far into the emotion mind, they're sort of like, you're like the athlete or whatever. You're just in the game, you're playing, you're participating. People are going to laugh at you. People are going to like celebrate you, and people are going to want to watch you because they're getting so much dopamine from you, right? Your inherent worth is existing in the game. But with reasonable mind, you're like the referee. You are the only reason that the game of basketball could exist is because you've set the rules and the foundation, but you're also the most hated person in basketball. And nobody remembers your name unless you're one of those people that like knows those little details. But I think there's something to be said about like, yes, it's good to have reasonable mind structure. You don't want all that. But at the same time, so many people are not giving and receiving dopamine because they're not existing in their inherent worth as a human being, They're holding themselves back. And there's like pros and cons to that. Like, yeah, you're gonna like get on people's like nerves and just annoy people. But at the same time, if you don't ever exist, then you're erasing stimulation and going back into a state of contemplation and never playing on the playground, essentially,
And it's like, that's why it's like a dance between both sides of the spectrum. Like if you're completely caught in an emotional mind, you're going to be someone who's dating someone where your friends are like, why do you keep doing this to yourself? But then if you're caught completely in that rational mind, you're going to be dating someone and your friends are going to be looking at you like, can you just admit to yourself this is not enjoyable?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I agree. And that's also an interesting contrast because it's like you could be, if you're with that guy and they're making you feel all the emotions of like, oh, this is so much dopamine. Maybe they're a narcissist and they feel a false sense of assurance all the time. And you're with them. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, why are you with this person? Just like you said. But it's so funny the contrast between that and the judgment you give yourself sometimes of like, I'm with this person and they're so nice. And you're like, I have no reason to leave them outside of the fact to say that I'm just not interested. And some people just beat themselves up so much because they're not willing to leave. And it's interesting contrast between the view of the outside world and yourself with the person that's dangerous of like, I want this person. I'm afraid to admit that I don't want to leave them. But then on the other side, it's like, oh my gosh, like this person, they're on paper perfect. So all my friends will judge me if I leave them or something like that,
And I think it's even deeper than the social aspect. It's like, if you're with someone who checks all the boxes, but they're not scratching that itch that you're looking to be scratched, then there's a part of you that is kind of asking yourself, like, am I just not experiencing this person correctly? Like, I know that sounds bizarre, me saying it now, but it's like, what's wrong with me if I can't enjoy this? And it's like, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that your criteria for picking someone is probably not aligned with what you actually need. It's aligned with what you think you need. And that distance between those two things is what's causing your unhappiness. And it's a second ago you said something about, okay, you said two things. You're like, no one remembers the names of referees. I will just say Angel Hernandez. For anyone who watches baseball, we remember that guy's name because that guy fucking sucks. But anyway,
I knew you would know one. I was like, you're going to break the analogy.
I know many.
Oh my gosh,
we can go
really?
into the WNBA. I'll give you some rest. But besides that, you mentioned dating a narcissist. I feel like dating a narcissist is kind of like, it's like dating a sleeper cell. Like, you might not know. They're not going to flip on you until they completely have their hooks in you. You know, it's like the Prince Harrys of the world. It's like you'll be you'll have denounced the crown living in Montecito before you even realize, holy fuck, I made a mistake.
Yep. And if you go down that path with a narcissist, it's such a good example of the safety and assurance versus the pleasure, because like, I think that one of the most important parts of dating that people don't realize is it's more about how you feel rather than what you do. So if you are being the perfect partner and you feel like you're doing something wrong, the other person might pick up on that, or like you feel nervous and all the other stuff. But so you're not creating a sense of safety and assurance in yourself. But the narcissist is so good at creating a sense of assurance in both themselves and you, even when they don't meet the criteria.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they could be treating you like crap,
But they're great with words.
but they're so great with words, and they actually feel like they're treating you like royalty. Like, how could you judge and doubt how good of a person I'm being to you? And you're like, yeah, maybe you're right. Because the narcissist feels like the perfect partner. So you start to feel like they're the perfect partner too. But then 3 months pass by, the mask comes off, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, I feel
3 months, it could be 3 years.
It could be 10 years.
Yeah.
It can lead you down a really rough path because you slowly start losing reality testing right down that path.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, and I think it also applies to non-narcissist relationships where you're just kind of like, your gut is saying no, and you somehow don't trust your gut, but ultimately, like you said, I mean, I feel like with a lot of clients who come in and they're unsure about their relationship, the first question I always ask is, okay, but what is it like when you're actually spending time together? Oh, it's great. Well, then what's the fucking problem?
Mm-hmm.
You know? Well, the problem sometimes is there's actual issues, but a lot of times it's, well, the idea I had in my head of how this is supposed to go is not matching up with the experience. It's like, well, is the experience good and enjoyable and something you want to keep doing? Yes. Well, then maybe the idea you have in your head is something you have to modify.
Right. If you're actually just enjoying yourself, then what's the problem?
That's it.
Yeah, it's
like,
good.
There's no more.
This is an interesting piece too, and really goes to my like ADHD stuff. But I think that with ADHD, it's so hard to catch yourself before you end up somewhere that you don't want to be, because you're such like a habitual learner. Like, it's like with ADHD, whatever's novel and right in front of your face, that's the thing that you really latch onto, like with your hooks, and it takes a while for you to cool down. So like, I think that people with ADHD are sort of like trains, and people without ADHD are more like cars. Like, if you're someone who's neurotypical, you leave your house and you go in the wrong direction, you can shift your location and say, oh, I need to back up in this parking lot, turn back and go this way. But with ADHD, it takes you a long time for something to pique your interest. It takes a while for the engine to start up on the train. And the consequences for going in the wrong direction can be huge, because once you're down that path, it's hard to unlatch and turn back around. So with dating and all that, I find a lot of people with ADHD, and especially with anxious attachment, they will start to truly like latch on to someone and then start just word vomiting everything, their trauma, and so they're not complementing their vulnerability with commitment in different layers like that. So I think they operate based on their emotions more so, and they go down these paths and end up in places like, wow, 3 years, and I didn't realize that I was going down a path I shouldn't have been going down. You know.
So that is the pitfall of that, is you kind of, do you feel like people with ADHD and anxious attachment become like blind to how they feel then? Like 3 years down the road, they all of a sudden have this epiphany. I don't like this person.
I think it's like when you have anxious attachment and ADHD, like for example, the narcissist, you can more likely end up in a situation like that where you keep getting caught in this loop, difficulties with reality testing, and you make a bad decision and you go down this path. But I think a lot of times with ADHD and anxious attachment, you don't actually make it that far in relationships because you move too quickly. You know, you are wanting to engage with this person so much, and you experience that limerence, right? You know, you feel this hyper focus on someone, and then this experience of impulsivity. And so then once you start going down that path, you start wanting to make this person, you start imagining your marriage and your kids and everything. And it's only
Mhm.
been like date number 2.
I think you're 100% right. I have an idea in my head of this now, and I think you're 100% accurate on this. It's like there's I think the combination of like ADHD and anxious attachment is a recipe for low self-worth. And if not low self-worth, maybe like self-worth that's very labile, and it's definitely not like statically high. And because someone with ADHD and anxious attachment has low self-worth, there's like this um, minimizing of needs early on in the relationship just to establish kind of a foundation. And so you're kind of working on foundation building without ever, like, you're metaphorically kind of spackling the bricks and not even sure if you want a foundation with this person. And by the time you've built the foundation, now you're starting to work on the shutters of the house. You're like, wait a minute, maybe I don't even want to be here.
Yeah, like how the heck did I get here?
Yeah, you
Right?
pick your head up and it's like, oh my God, I have a
Mhm.
dog now.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many dynamics like that with ADHD, right? Like you start on a project and then you realize that it's 3 a.m. You know, you're playing a video game, you're trying to have fun, and then you need to go to bed on time because you gotta get up at 5. But because of impulsivity, the reward of the short term novel experience outweighs the importance of the consequences of the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of the reason why, you know, with ADHD and anxious attachment, that dating can be so traumatic is because you are truly someone who is feeling this impulsive desire for someone. You're hyper focused on them, you're hyper fixating on them, you're experiencing limerence, and you are like a train that's just fully in motion moving towards this person with lots of energy. And so you're thinking 7 steps ahead about how you want this person to be yours for eternity, and you haven't even had the first sort of courtship process where you're supposed to be figuring out like what are the green flags, what are the red flags of this relationship. And so a good tip for people that are trying to date with anxious attachment and ADHD is to really focus on pausing and planning, because you have much more consequences starting up a train in a certain direction than a car does, you know. So as you're moving, I would say that if you can start to look at the person you're talking to, notice your desire for just to be with them forever,
Mm-hmm.
and then ask yourself more questions of like, well, what are the actual facts of the relationship? Um, how can I pause and not allow myself to overcommit to certain things before I learn more about this person? How can I imagine that they have bad breath and you know, fart or whatever? You know, just like bringing them down to earth so that you can slowly start to actually build a healthy relationship with someone without going so far before you get lost.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think just regardless of attachment, I think someone with ADHD, it's like their attention is th- they're so nearsighted.
Hmm.
they they're so nearsighted in terms of what is in front of them, that I imagine kind of longer term problems in relationships that need to be solved and addressed that bother them can probably very quickly escape their attention and never actually be addressed. There's probably a lot of especially, I think people with ADHD in relationships probably tend to avoid with more regularity issues in the relationship. One, because it's this problem solving thing that it requires long term sustained attention. This is a long term, big problems require kind of long term solutions. you can't fix a big problem with a single conversation. But if you have ADHD, just remembering the problem probably is difficult.
Yeah.
And so you're probably always kind of stuck dealing with what's in front of you versus feeling like there are bigger things that just remain unaddressed, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Because with ADHD, the question in your mind is not what's true about reality, but it's more so what's most stimulating about reality. So the things that are less stimulating, even if they're true, you might not notice that while you're dating. You're noticing all these red flags with people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people with ADHD just end up in these really toxic relationships sometimes. But I don't think that means that they always end up in those relationships. There's really good capacity for
I'm holding you
good.
to it. You're saying that they always do.
No. Yeah, never. I've never met one. I got ADHD and I have a great relationship.
Oh, that's true. I was thinking.
I got evidence.
I was just trying to get people mad at you.
Yeah.
What do you say? So, if you ever noticed, I'm a big YouTube guy, but every interview on YouTube where someone's trying to just like fuck over the interviewee, they always go, so you're saying that you want to kill children. Is that what you're saying?
You're going to start doing that to me. There's a lot of people that already don't like me. So,
Is there really? I don't think so.
In the past.
If anything, I feel like people like me less than they like you.
Do you think so?
Yes.
You get negative comments?
I feel like I'm a little bit harder to digest.
Oh, wow. Why is that? You're the one screaming at the wedding?
You know what's funny is at my sister's wedding,
you were screaming.
Well, I was the man of honor, or the maid of honor. I call myself the maid of honor. But my speech was pretty off the cuff. I mean, I had some rough ideas of what I wanted to say.
Oh, wow.
But I just was like totally spitballing in the moment.
That is you. Yeah, going off the cuff. I'm more so, I remember at my sister's wedding, I wanted to go straight off script, and I was still dysregulated. If you were like, where the hell is he going?
It's a skill to like feel like you're not going to have a meltdown if you deviate from crazy structure, and I think that's why, not to bring it back to dating, but I think one of the reasons people don't enjoy dating is because they add unnecessary expectations on the way certain parts of a relationship are supposed to go. And because they add these unnecessary expectations, all of a sudden, the second you add an expectation into a situation is the second you create an opportunity to miss that expectation and then feel like you're not doing a good enough job at whatever performance you think you have to do. And I think that's kind of what keeps people from feeling like it could be an enjoyable experience. Like, oh, this doesn't have to be anything. We could just be completely, we don't have to add unnecessary structure into something that is really just a get to know you phase, you know?
And I think that makes people overly anxious in dating for sure. Like if you have a very conservative bar for what needs to happen and for a date to be considered like good, then that makes it more likely that you'll experience anxiety when those expectations aren't met. Versus if you don't have those expectations in the first place, you can have more fun. And I think whenever I'm working with people, I give them like two different pieces of advice with dating. And my favorite one is it's not about what you do on the date, but it's about how you feel. Because with dating, you can be with someone having a good time, and then they say, oh, hey, well, I'm big on books, and I don't think I could ever date someone unless they also like books. You could laugh at that.
Is that a real experience?
No, I'm just making that up.
Oh, okay. I'm like, that person sounds like an asshole.
But if you respond to that person with like,
I'm big on books. Who says that?
They deserve to be rejected. But if you respond to that with like, oh my gosh, I don't read enough books, you might not like me, and that could ruin the date, right? But if you respond with like, no, I don't read books, that's weird. Like, or maybe that's more avoidant, but yeah, no, I don't read any books, but hopefully, I'm enjoying this time with you. And if you feel internally regulated while you tell them that you don't also read books, what a lot of people come to find is that it never mattered whether you read books or not. It just mattered that you felt internally regulated while you're with someone. And I mean, that's all in the attachment literature too, right? Like the things that foster secure attachment in kids is if you both feel regulated with them as a caretaker and also are competent enough to take care of them, like to meet their needs and whatnot,
Well, there's that famous marriage experiment where they basically hooked long-term relationship couples up to like an EEG machine to measure their heart rate and all this stuff, skin conductance, whatever. And what they found was the determining factor for the longevity of a relationship was when your partner entered the room, did your heart rate increase or decrease?
Mm.
Uh, and if it increased, then the likelihood of you breaking up is significantly higher than if it decreased, because the takeaway, the interpretation of that is your partner should be someone who helps you feel safe, not someone who makes you feel in danger. And at kind of a primordial level, if their presence gets you anxious, it's probably a bad sign for a long-term relationship.
Yeah. And I mean, just to really keep going off that, like, I think that's why people with anxious attachment have so much issues with dating, because they're just always dysregulated. And I think that's tricky because, like, with anxious attachment, dating can often be re-traumatizing because as a child, you were abandoned by your most important attachment figures. So what happens when you're a child and your trauma is being abandoned? Well, one, your whole neural chemistry is changing because now emotional unavailability is starting to resemble the most important attachment to you as a child. And now as an adult, as you're dating and you're trying to find your potential most important attachment figure, you think that it requires so much work and effort. And then when you get rejected while dating, and it's likely because now you're feeling this chemistry with emotional unavailability because that resembles childhood. Once you get rejected, now that just digs into the wound that you felt when you felt abandoned as a child.
It
So,
confirms it.
yes.
It's like, yes, do you see, this is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the truth manifesting over and over again.
And then you're trying to get mastery over that because you feel like, oh my gosh, like if I can just prove this truth wrong, and you're putting yourself in situations where that truth is still going to keep happening over and over again. You know, you're trying to get mastery, but it's not working.
Mm-hmm. And I think with anxious attachment, I think part of the overcoming anxious attachment in a relationship is you have to recognize, okay, so I'm sitting here, my partner's in the other room, I'm feeling anxious, I feel like they're mad at me. What's the evidence for that? Well, nothing has happened. They don't tend to have really an irritable disposition anyway. And we've had a nice day. So what does that tell you? It should make you curious. How could I be feeling this despite the fact that there is no evidence in this moment that that person is frustrated with me or upset with me? It should tell you that it's coming from somewhere else. You know, like that should be your first clue of, well, if I'm feeling this and there's no stimulus, then it must be some memory and it's probably not attached to this person, you know? And I think that's the first step in changing your perception of danger in relationships. It's like, well, if nothing's actually happening and I can objectively witness nothing's happening and I'm still feeling this way, then it's not coming from this experience.
Yeah, I really do think that's the first step because, like, imagine if you don't have that ability to test reality, right? Like, you just are truly believing, like, no, they are putting me in a situation where I'm not emotionally safe. When in reality, your ability to feel assured in what feels like chaos is the thing that's off, you know? Like, chaos for you is actually what chaos in your mind is actually not chaos. It's I'm really struggling to say this.
What?
Like, I'm trying to say that your perception of chaos is off. That's basically it. Yeah, it's not chaos. It's stability, but you overassume how chaotic things are, and then that assumption makes you dysregulated. And then that goes back to the study you're talking about, where you know your heart is racing when you see your partner, and now the relationship's success likelihood is now off. You know.
Yeah, no, I think it's your perception of reality is distorted because of past experiences, which is like what keeps us in business.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
the problem with kind of overcoming that is I think oftentimes people do end up dating similar figures to their parents because it is familiar to them, and what's familiar has a gravitational pull. And so someone who's listening to this will be hearing us talk and hearing me say, you know, test the reality of danger, and they're like, no, this person is often upset with me, and the reality is I'm often having to navigate someone who is is frustrated with me or triggering my fears of abandonment, and it's actually happening. And it's like, well, how do you end up in a situation where you're kind of replicating early childhood? It's because there's a part of you that's trying to fix a past problem with a present person, you know?
Yes. Yep.
Like, and you will, but some people will spend their entire lives trying to fix person B because person A is unfixable. It's like if your parents, if you always were pursuing your parents' comfort and they never gave it to you, and now you're with someone who is also kind of demanding you pursue them, you're going to be constantly frustrated and basically confirming your fear, which is like this is what all relationships must be like.
Yes, totally. Yeah. And I mean another sort of like behavioral reason I think that happens is because like your ability to regulate yourself with anxious attachment is not built in. So if you're someone with anxious attachment and you don't know how to regulate on your own, now you're going to be more desperate for connection in relationships. And so when you see someone who's emotionally unavailable, then you see that as an opportunity to fight for relationships. If that person had more secure attachment or they weren't a narcissist, they would feel like, stop putting me on a pedestal, you know? But someone who's avoidant or a narcissist is going to say, wow, they're desperate for me. That feels good. So I think a lot of people with anxious attachment actually don't experience a lot of relationships with securely attached people, because securely attached people might feel like, I don't think this is going to work because I don't want to be God in this relationship. And so now that they're with emotionally unavailable people, the anxiously attached person who hasn't learned to build their own system of regulation now has to compensate by finding external sources. And the only external sources willing to participate with them might be unhealthy sources because they are excited at the idea of codependency, you know?
I would take it one step further and say that people with that narcissistic kind of selfish, self-absorbed people specifically seek out anxiously attached people. They kind of prey upon them. They can sniff them from a mile away, and they often are the ones that descend upon them and see the opportunity even before it's begun, because someone with anxious attachment is so susceptible to pursuing, and someone who is narcissistic or self-absorbed, they want that pursuit, they want that pursuit to happen forever. They want the person that they're with to constantly feel like they're just missing the mark, so that they have to keep working for it. You know, they want to feel like their partner is always kind of mildly dissatisfied with them, and therefore the anxiously attached person has to constantly be working, constantly trying to gain something from this other person. And the narcissist in that dynamic is that is the most comfortable position they can be in. They feel the most secure when someone is actively taking responsibility for whatever conflict that's being created.
Yeah, it validates the reality of the narcissist and it creates feelings of safety for the person who's avoidant. Because with dating with avoidant attachment, you are most comfortable with what's most safe to you. So if someone is anxiously attached and they're pursuing, now if you're someone who's avoidant and I'm anxious about putting myself out there, you only enjoy relationships where people are throwing themselves at you. But if you're avoidant and you feel more comfortable with the pursuit process, you're like, well, I'm comfortable with pursuing people, but I don't like the commitment aspect. You're like, well, I like someone that can handle dark humor, like in jokes in that way. I think everybody does, of course.
Yeah.
That's healthy. That's healthy. I'm not saying that's unhealthy. I'm saying that avoidant people with avoidant attachment are more comfortable with like, how can I be in relationship with you without actually being truly in relationship with you? Because if there's strings attached, now I don't want to be responsible for you and all your emotional stuff, you know?
I think an avoidantly attached person wants to have their cake and eat it too. And
Mm.
that often keeps the person they're dating in a constant state of frustration. It's like you're getting like a taste of a meal, but you never get the full thing. You're never full with those types of people. And I think it's kind of exhausting to strong arm an avoidantly attached person into giving the full meal, because even if you can successfully get them to give it, the fact that you had to strong arm them into doing it kind of defeats the whole purpose. You know, if I have to like take your arms and put them around me and tell you to squeeze, that is not the same as if you like organically just gave me a hug.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
You're
Like
like, this feels the same, but it doesn't feel the same at all.
right. It's like the ice cream analogy. Like, oh,
Hmm.
this is ice cream, and you could just eat pounds and pounds of ice cream, but you never actually feel true intimacy,
Hmm.
as if there's strings attached. But the prerequisite for true intimacy is, giving people the capacity to hurt you. Because, like you said, like if you give someone a hug, you have to expose yourself. But if you force them to do it, right, like that doesn't recreate the real intimacy, right? It's forced. It's not real.
If you force them to do it, you will guarantee a hug, but you will take away the the vulnerability that comes with if you didn't force them, it might not happen. They might reject you. But if it did happen and you didn't force them, I mean, this is something that I have a hard time verbalizing. So let's do it on a podcast. But uh, I feel like it's hard for people to understand that you can only really feel connection with someone when you give them an opportunity to not connect with you.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like if you are in a position where you are doing lots of things for your partner and you are afraid about what happens if you stop. Well, how does the dynamic change if I stop doing all these extra things for them? That kind of obscures the true nature of the relationship. You're not giving you're also kind of preventing the other person from demonstrating how much they care about you. You know, do they stick around when you stop doing extra stuff? You don't know. You never will know unless you stop doing it. And so you're kind of withholding the true clarity of what this relationship is.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like with avoidant attachment, you're only comfortable when you're in a state of control
Hmm.
and when you're not allowing people the ability to hurt, manipulate, and all that stuff. But in order to feel actual love in relationships, you have to give people the capacity to hurt you, to control you in some way, to see you at a point of vulnerability. Like a lot of people with avoidant attachment will say, I tried to make this relationship work. And when they hurt me or did something wrong, I was vulnerable. I told them to cut that out, you know? And I'm like, did you ever say ouch and just let it rest there and say, this hurt me? You had the ability, and like, no, that feels weak. Well, that's where you have to start, because if you respond with anger and control, you aren't truly giving that person the capacity to hurt you. But if you let a tear out and you say, ouch, like this, you really hurt me today when you said this, this, and this. That softens you, and then that allows that person to say, "Well, I don't care, get over it," and it gives them the capacity to say, like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?"
Hmm.
But if you never allow that to happen as the avoidant person, you never give people the opportunity to prove that maybe they are willing to take your needs seriously.
I'm. Let me analyze your analysis. So I think what you're saying, what you're saying is you hate. No, but what you're saying is that like anxiously attached people, I think, have a high tendency of assuming way more responsibility in relationships than is appropriate, right? So let's go based on that premise. They have a tendency to take on way more responsibility about a relationship than they should. So in a situation where there's a conflict and they're being vulnerable, the true vulnerability is expressing a problem without providing a solution. Like by saying, ow, that what you just said bothered me, without asking them to apologize, without trying to resolve it. You're not taking that sense of responsibility that you normally feel. You're actually putting the responsibility out into the world and saying, who would like to take it? And I think anxiously attached people have a very hard time doing that, because they feel like, well, if I'm going to say, hey Jacob, you pissed me off, it's also my responsibility to give you a path to resolution. It's like, no, it's not. Why is it your responsibility to fix something that you didn't start?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you think about the wound of anxious attachment, it is abandonment, and your solution to that wound is fighting, kicking, and screaming for affection. It's not ouch and crying alone. So with anxious attachment, to heal it, you have to start challenging the urgency of communication, of trying to build your relationships through the glue of control. You have to allow there to be space between communication and allowing people the chance to walk away or to come towards you. But yeah, you're right. You try to build that sense of control by saying, I, and you believe that's the only currency for control with anxious attachment. The only currency for me to connect with you is through my words and some sort of action on my part. And if it doesn't happen in that way, then that starts to feel like, well, this isn't about me. You know, I didn't make this happen. You lack dopamine. So yeah, I agree. I think that
That's a great T-shirt. You lack dopamine.
you lack dopamine.
That would be like
control.
if like a psychologist was like also a rapper. That's like his diss track. You lack dopamine.
You absent dopamine.
Oh, by the way, I on my way here, I had a funny thought of like we should like totally shift gears and just be like the super like masculine red pill podcast.
I think so, yeah.
And then we can change our name from Two Dudes Talking Therapy, and we change it to Mentally Jacked.
Which I laughed louder than I thought I would to that.
Which I am genuinely like. My wife and I are
Mentally
genuinely considering getting a neon sign that says "Mentally Jacked" and putting it in my office. I think it'd be so funny.
People would die laughing.
I know.
They're like, I don't even need to talk to you for therapy. I just needed to see this.
I think it might detract from the bench I have yet to build, which I would like attention about as well, though. So
I'll support
I'll
you.
stagger.
You tell me what you're lacking, and I'll help you. I'll make the mentally jacked thing.
Mentally jacked, and it's like a picture of a bicep.
Black Kings on steroids.
Black. You'd have to shave your head because the red pill. All of us in the red pill are losing our hair, and so you kind of have to.
Because of the stress for all the haters out there.
Well, apparently, hair loss is attached to like excessive testosterone. Apparently,
Really?
I don't know.
Wow.
I heard this like 10
Too
years ago
strong
on a
for hair.
Snapple fact or something. But you said a word before that I want to get back to. You said the word urgency. And I feel like anxiously attached people in relationships tend to have an insane sense of urgency to resolve things. And I've spent a lot of time wondering why that is the case. I've noticed it in myself. I've noticed it in a lot of clients. And I think the answer is it all goes back to that sense of responsibility. You know, if you're in a classroom and all of the kids are yelling, but you're also a kid, there's no urgency to tell people to be quiet. But if you're in the front of the class and you're a teacher, all of a sudden it's now you're the one who has to tell them, hey, be quiet. And I think the same applies to dating, where you feel this insane sense of responsibility to your partner and to the relationship. And so now when there is a conflict, and let's say you're the one upset, maybe the anxiously attached person is upset, there's an urgency to get over that frustration internally because, look, you're harming the relationship. At least that's the thought someone with anxious attachment has. And so because they have this sense of responsibility, they also have this urgency to smooth things over quicker than they have to be. And I often find people with anxious attachment are not giving space to the problems of the relationship as much as they should. They have a tendency to minimize issues that they have because of the disharmony it causes in relationships, but it's at the expense of the relationship in the long term, but it's, it benefits the short term of peace.
Yeah, totally. That makes perfect sense.
Sorry, just vomiting all that.
No, I follow.
Mentally jacked.
Mentally jacked. Stay strong. Stay strong, guys. You're right, though. I mean, when I think about even just going back to that question, right, of like, well, what makes people with anxious attachment so urgent when it comes to communication? And I think if you parallel it to the opposite of like avoidant attachment, right? Like people with avoidant attachment, they cope with dysregulation by pretending that dopamine doesn't exist external to them. But with anxious attachment, the way that you cope with dysregulation is by seeking external sources of regulation. So now outside information becomes urgent. And if you can quickly send that text, or you can quickly get in touch with this person that you know can hear you out and talk with, that's going to feel much more urgent than sitting alone and trying to regulate by yourself. And so it's almost like this feeling of like running out of something, so that you can make sure that you get something that is just only available for a short period of time external to yourself. And so you're sitting down thinking, oh my gosh, like I need to quickly text this person. Like, no, it's not that urgent. They'll be fine and you'll be fine. Because I think the other issue with anxious attachment is that like distance feels like abandonment. So for you're thinking, oh my gosh, I need them to text me right away so that I can regulate. Otherwise, now I'm feeling all the trauma and triggering from my childhood of abandonment. But on the other end, you're also thinking, wait, this person is waiting for a response from me. So I don't want them to feel like the lost, abandoned child that I was. And so with working with anxious attachment, I often tell people, challenge your assumption that distance feels like abandonment. That person is probably eating popcorn and eating cake, watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And you're out here thinking, oh man, they are this sad child just suffering, waiting for me to send them a text. Like, no, you're not that important to them. I mean, you're very important, but that communication is not going to save the day. Just like it ought not to for you while you're alone waiting for. Maybe you ought to watch Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You know.
You're saying a bunch of stuff, and I'm having like 1,000 thoughts. What were you just saying a second ago?
Like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
No, that's what threw me off, you fucking asshole. No. What were you saying? What were you saying a second ago?
The urgency, distance feels like abandonment.
Yeah. And you said something else that prompted me into this thought of like, I think people with anxious attachment, they try to modify their partner by modeling behavior to them that they would like to receive. So if I would like for you to, if I really need you to say hello and give me a kiss when you walk through the door after work, right? I'm going to say hello and give you a kiss when I walk through the door after work, right? So that's in their head, they're like, unconsciously they're going, if I act like this, the other person will understand what my needs are, but then they never verbalize what their needs are, or maybe the other person doesn't have the same needs. And so they're modeling behavior and passively hoping the other person meets their needs without ever explicitly stating what those needs are. And they end up being frustrated going, look, I do all these things for this person and they're not reciprocating. It's like, well, why are you doing all these things? Are you doing all these things because you want them to do that for you? Because they probably don't need that from you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want them to do it for you, then verbalize it and have them do it for you. But you don't need to model that behavior if it's not meeting their needs.
Yeah, totally. That's 100% trying to control like what you want from the other person without taking accountability of like, I just want this for myself, you know? So you're trying to role model that. I didn't think about that, but that makes a lot of sense.
And I have another thought for anxiously attached people, but also for anyone. And this is something that I believe that a good relationship, there will be lots of slack for you to fuck up in a moderate to minor way. Like this feeling that you have to be perfect in order to make it to the finish line of a long-term relationship, I think is a fallacy. And it's something that it's a false belief that people develop when they have crappy relationships that ends out of nowhere, right? A crappy relationship can end out of nowhere. A crappy relationship has very little slack, but a good relationship has enough slack where you feel like you can have some movement and work on some of your stuff in the relationship and things are still going to be okay. I think that's, if the relationship is good, it probably has slack. You can reverse engineer knowing if a relationship is good by looking at that kind of factor.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to the regulation piece too, like just to give a very like meta example, but whenever I'm talking about something, I feel like I have to have it just right and to articulate it a certain way. And I don't have to have it just right. But here's what happens. Once I go off script a bit and I start to talk about something in a way that I'm like, I don't know. It's not the content of what I'm saying that's the problem. It's the dysregulation. It's the belief that, oh, this is crap what I'm saying right now. And
it's
then
the
people feel that. It's the internal commentary that starts to disrupt what's happening when in reality, like if I just go off the cuff and go into flow state, like people are truly appreciative until the perpetrator starts to say, this isn't good enough. This is
and you
not prepared enough.
You know what happens 100% of the time the commentary does take over is you're much less in your body, you're way more in your head. And if that's the problem, then you're also one step away from knowing the solution. If the problem is in those moments of anxiety, you withdraw from you kind of dissociate from your body and go into your head, then the solution is to bring yourself back into your body. Even if it's an unpleasant experience, which it is, there's a reason you're dissociating from your physiological state.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's not the best option to go back into it. And it's funny too, because if you look at like attachment theory, right? Like the difference between an anxiously attached person and an avoidantly attached person, they both have this unstable parental figure that they have assessed as unstable. And then they have this decision. They're like, okay, my attention then, so an anxiously attached person, the way they solve that problem is I'm going to fixate my attention on this other person and that's how I'm going to get my needs met. And the avoidantly attached infant unconsciously decides, I'm going to fixate on my own person, on my own needs, even even if I probably can't satisfy those needs.
Yeah.
And so you're hyper focused either on yourself or the other person, and that's where all the issues in
Wow.
adulthood starts.
That's really well said. Yeah. That makes perfect sense.
So an avoidantly attached person might seem self-absorbed, but really what they're doing is anxiously retreating into a primordial pattern of, I'm going to focus on what I can focus on. You know, like an avoidantly attached infant basically is unconsciously saying, you got to focus on what's within your control. I mean, they're not saying that, but they're acting it out. And an anxiously attached infant is just basically going, you got to focus on the thing that's completely outside your control.
Yes. And I mean, that also just shows why avoidant people come across as so selfish sometimes. It's because they have so focused on the internal piece of like, I can take care of myself. It's this internal regulation. Like I think about driving to work. I see this little kid walking around the parking lot, right? There's an adult nearby, but they're like 10 feet. And if I drove forward, I wouldn't hit them, but I'm going to drive extremely slow around this little kid. And it's because that kid is impulsive. They're not worried about anything. They're just having fun. They're being themselves. But because they're existing more in their emotion mind, I have to make myself smaller to fit their needs. So and I think avoidant people do that all the time. They're constantly trying to follow the rules to make sure they don't get in anybody else's way. They play the referee all the time, so they get an absence of dopamine. Then they feel warranted to go out and discard and cheat on people. And then also the avoidant person starts to feel like, I need to focus on my needs first to self-preserve. And then the world looks at them and like, you jerks, you know? But
and so the to reverse engineer this, if you want to heal in a relationship and you have avoidant attachment, you first have to understand that you're operating from a belief that your needs are not something other people can meet. So step one is knowing what those needs are, and step two is expressing them to someone who you're in a relationship with and giving them an opportunity to demonstrate whether or not your belief is true or not.
yes.
I mean, some people suck. So maybe you're dating someone where they confirm that truth, but that also illustrates that the relationship is not going to work out. But you're also, if you're avoidantly attached, you're not giving people the opportunity to demonstrate whether or not they can meet your needs. And that's where the avoidance really kind of rears its ugly head.
Yeah, totally. I want to, how much time do we have?
Like 7 minutes.
We promised questions. I have a couple here. I don't know if you tracked any.
No, I don't. No one talks to me. I try to just evoke sympathy from people. No one likes me. No. Actually, I really enjoy the community that has been growing around us. It's really like validating of you know, when we first started, it was like, who knows if people will like this, and then every comment that we see, it's like, oh my God, it's so rewarding.
It's the comments that really, it gives us it kept us going, I think. You know, because it's like we were doing this, it was fun, but also it's like, wow, people find this meaningful. You know? So I was like, wow, it's a cool community. People actually out there interested in stuff we are interested in. You know. One question someone asked was, and I said we'll definitely speak on this, so I have to. They said, "What would dealing with loneliness? Can you speak more on dealing with loneliness and how it affects the way people date?" Let me make sure I read that right. Oh, dealing with loneliness and how it affects the way or the people you date. So I guess people who don't have many attachment figures around them. I thought that was pretty good because it made me think about fearful attachment. I mean, if you don't have much positive attachment experiences, now all connection feels very scarce. And so one, that motivates you to feel like you need to desperately reach for connection. In addition, it also makes you feel like you might want to be standoffish to it because you don't want something to have power over you. So you can kind of choose between those two roles of, you know, anxious and avoidant attachment there.
You can become hyper independent.
Yep. And I mean, I just came back from a camp working with kids. It was like a foster camp, and a lot of the kids, they were that. They had no attachments, and some of the kids that I met that I was working with, they were very, very kind to me, you know, but they felt completely dysregulated around their peers and stuff like that. But when their attachment needs started to get met more by like me and some of the other like people working there, they started to feel more comfortable around the other kids, and they started to treat me more like crap. And it's because now they're not treating me good out of desperation for connection.
Uh-huh.
Now they're choosing out of love and all that, which was cool. And then there was some good moments still there too. But
Well, I think that also kind of illustrates adults in dating. If there is a feeling of desperation, then your blinders are going to be on in terms of seeing viable partners. You know, like you're gonna overestimate who really could work for you because you have this sense of anxiety about being by yourself. And so if there's a feeling of scarcity, you're not gonna approach dating the way that would be most effective for you, because ultimately, like, you can find someone that might be interested in dating you, but that doesn't necessarily make it inherently a net positive in your life.
yeah.
And by the time you realize that, it could be way down the road. And also, I just feel like with if you don't have like a peer group and you're dating, I think a big part of dating that's helpful is using your friends kind of as a sounding board to go, what do you think of this? Like, we've been on a couple dates. Like, you need other people as sort of a reality check to go, what's been in your experience? How do you read this? This is how I feel. But if you're kind of living this solitary life and then you're on dating apps, and so you're kind of going on dates, but then you have no one to really talk to about it, your sense of reality is just going to be so warped and distorted. It's going to be hard to know, like, is this a good thing I have going? Should I keep pursuing it? You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean. Because I mean, I have also this theory of like emotions where it's like the more invalidation you receive, the more dysregulated you are, the more difficult your emotions are sort of to aim. And so then you go out into the world and try to build relationships, and you're swinging and punching people in the face by mistake, because you don't have those connections, and then now you're entering relationships. And I think that feedback is huge. Like, I think healing attachment, part of the work is being as proactive as possible, because the more proactive you can be in building good attachments and good relationships, the more you're able to sort of foster healthy relationships, even more so down the line. Like me and Toby were watching Love Is Blind, and there's the guy Jeremiah that he seems more secure in his attachment, and I mean, everybody's got their stuff, but he says one of his deal breakers in dating is if somebody doesn't have a whole lot of good history of friendships. And I was like, that is really strategic and good.
For sure. There's always this line that you hear every once in a while, especially like I hear it more from women, but it's like, I want someone that's similar to my dad. I respect him. I have a good relationship with him, and I like his values. But it's like the only reason you can say that is because you have a frame of reference of a secure attachment, and you already know what that feels like. You like the feeling of maybe security, or you like the feeling of emotional safety or whatever. But you wouldn't be able to say. It's kind of like someone who has tried a lot of different food. It's like I only have a refined palate because I've had experiences that have shown me what good food tastes like.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that's how you instill secure attachment, right? Like, it's like something you can receive for the most part. A lot of times you can open yourself up to it, but ideally, like when I was working with a lot of those kids, like the kid I was working with, like or I won't go into details.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
it might not be the most important thing, but a lot of people need to receive it in order to. But anyways, time wise, maybe we could do an extra 5 minutes on this episode and take that out the next one. So we'll just keep going for a bit. That way we can get to a couple more of these questions. Okay, that's not a question.
It just says "fuck you, Jacob." That was me. Sorry.
Let's see here. Oh, disorganized attachment. Please, we need help too. We do miss out on fearful attachment a whole lot.
Yeah.
I mean, that could even be a whole episode in and of itself. I don't know.
I mean, maybe we talk about it in the next one. You want to talk about fearful for the next
Tune into
episode?
the next episode. We're going to talk about fearful attachment.
You want to talk about it then?
Yeah, I'm down.
You want to just cut it here then?
Wait,
Or
let
do
me
you have
see,
any other questions?
let me see if there's anyone. Oh, maybe one more. Not knowing if you like them. So I asked the question, what's most difficult about dating? Someone wanted to know, well, could we learn more about not knowing if you like them genuinely or if it's ADHD just enjoying the attention? I think that's sort of a question of, how do you know if you actually like someone with ADHD? Is it just a dopamine chase that you're going after, or is it actual connection?
Well, it's like, I feel like it's the difference between like a focused spotlight versus a more like kind of spread out floodlight. You know, like yes, it's kind of like when someone goes to therapy for the first time and they walk out and then they're not entirely sure why, but they just really like the experience, right? It's just like this holistic whole feeling of goodness, which makes them come back. Whereas someone who walks out of therapy and it's like, well, they taught me this skill and they gave me this worksheet. Your spotlight is working, but there's no floodlight, in that circumstance.
Yeah.
And I feel like with relationships too, it's like, why did we become friends? Because the first time we hung out, it was like, oh, that was nice. But there wasn't I didn't have to explain it.
Yeah.
And I think that it goes back to the box checking. It's like if you're talking about boxes, or if you're pointing out specific experiences, like, oh, it was really fun that day, versus like, I just like being around them. If you can change the context and every circumstance is enjoyable, then I think it's a good sign. When I went on, I had this is not a good example, but when I had to do like a research conference when I was in my PhD program, and I was in Atlanta, and my now wife was tagging along, and she came, and we had like a day in Atlanta. No offense to Atlanta, but it's not like the most enjoyable city in the world. But we had such a good time because it wasn't where we were; it was who we were with. You know what I mean?
I think so. Yeah, it's like you start to feel like this familiarity that feels good, and I think with ADHD, it's like novelty starts to feel like the thing you're obsessed about. But I'll even add that, like, if you have ADHD and you're dating and you feel those things, right? I think that when you feel hyperfixation and hyperfocus and even a bit of limerence sometimes in dating, I don't think that's exclusive to an unhealthy category. I think that that is an inherently good experience. I think the issue with people with ADHD is that they can hyperfixate in a way that on the wrong things and the wrong things that they're hoping to get out the relationship, and they're finding themselves hitting the go button even in the midst of red flags. And I think the most effective way to deal with that with ADHD is being more proactive. If you're a creature of habit, how can you train yourself habitually to get the green light at the right times and the red light at the right times? Because in relationships, if you're in a good, healthy relationship, it won't matter so much like when it feels like it's extreme, more intense or not. That just means you're going to run and play harder than the other kids, you know? And as long as you don't make that person your identity and you don't start to obsess about them in a way that makes them uncomfortable, where they feel like, oh my gosh, you need so much. I think with ADHD, you can relearn that relationship, make it habitual, and then you could be enjoying such a wonderful, flourishing relationship, just not in the exact same way as someone who's neurotypical.
I really like what you're saying, because it kind of points to people with ADHD always have this kind of like unconscious understanding of my car works differently than other cars. Other cars you can control the gas, but with relative ease. But for me, every time it goes over a certain mile per hour, I have to do this thing. And every time it goes below a certain mile per hour, I have to do this other thing. So I'm constantly kind of negotiating with my car to make sure it goes smoothly. And I think what you're saying is like that constant negotiation sometimes interrupts relationships, because you're trying to modify your experience rather than just kind of letting it passively and in an accepting way, just acknowledge like this is going to happen sometimes. You
Yeah.
know, it's going to fluctuate. It's going to go this and that way. But it's not so much the fluctuation that gets you tripped up. It's how you navigate the fluctuation that usually fucks you over.
Yes, exactly. And then the more dysregulated you get, the more symptomatic ADHD gets. So now the acceptance is gone. Invalidation.
That's a good. Let's end it.
Let's
there.
end there.
I have to use the restroom for a second anyway.
You're not allowed. I have to go too.
And then we'll go to the next one.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, cool. All right.